Would have, because our teachers are leaning towards interactive notebooks for every student anyway.
Okay.
So how would it be different, or what would they need additionally to meet the needs of the EB student?
I brought an example. So what we do in my English class, for instance, with our interactive notebooks. So for instance, we did text structures in my class last year. And so I have it to where we have the description, which is the type of text structure, so they can identify it. And then it's got the definition, it's got some keywords that go along with that, and then it gives them a graphic organizer. And then we've got it to where at the beginning of the notebook, which is what I had started this year, I have my notebook split in half. The beginning part of the notebook is reading, the back half is writing. So when we do reading and we have notes and they're doing comprehensive questions, they're doing all of that at the front, and all of their journal writing that they do is at the back. And that's a way for them to go back and check for vocabulary words that they're not sure of. They can find them and define them. But then they also have all the notes at the beginning. So when they do quizzes that don't necessarily have to be a closed note, then they can go back and use their notes to help them out with the quiz, because they have different ways of doing the different notes that they're taking for class. So that was an example of one. And then this was an activity that they did to go through and identify the actual text structure along with the taking of the notes.
So this is separate from the regular class?
This would be in their normal class. So when they're taking notes, which our science and math teachers do a lot of this.
Correct.
And I just want to get it to where maybe we can do it in more classrooms.
Right.
You
So
know,
are
so-
you're going to give all of the content teachers
We would
the
get
information to put in there? This is
Yeah, well, it would be their information, and they can make it into foldables, like foldable notes like this, because it helps with our EB students if they don't have to write quite as much when it comes to English. So that's one strategy that I was thinking about wanting to do. Another one would be, and I've seen this in the math class and the sciences classes too, where they have the notes kind of written out and then they have lines that the kids need to fill in. And that's really beneficial for our students, so they're not trying to write quite as much in English, and they get those key vocabulary terms that they really, really need to hone in on, so that they are understanding what it is that they're learning in the content.
Which brings up your February where you did the pre-filled notes and study guides. Those need to be done throughout the entire school year, because it's so much easier for the kids to grasp the ideas if they have that, and then they can fill in important words, and they're not taking all the extra notes.
So do you think maybe I should put both of those strategies in the same one? I was worried about trying to do too many strategies at one time.
So my question was, is the order of the strategies important?
No.
Okay. So
I did the interactive notebooks just because I thought it would be important for them to start with the notebook ready to go. These were the top 3 that I found that I thought we needed to do. I didn't want to do too many, because if you put them all at the same time, then it's going to overwhelm everybody. And so, but yeah, no, the order is not set, if that makes sense.
the only reason I ask is the second strategy, the vocabulary walls, that's kind of typically when teachers, before school starts, kids are coming in, they start kind of building that. I mean, that's just a thought on that side. And then I like that you have the reviews in here, but I think possibly add a review in May. To where you review all 3 strategies to kind of discuss what went well, what didn't went well,
What we
additions,
could do
changes.
next for next
Do
year.
we need to change the order or anything like that? For the next year. Where do we build from here?
And then I added to review the end of the year map.
When do we get end of the year map data?
Well, like they took it in March,
Okay.
so it should be March.
Once the full window closes, we get here.
So it's
Once
at
the
the end
window
of March.
closes, we can access it.
Yeah.
And also
I wasn't sure on that
I was
date.
wondering if you could add maybe some celebrating success days in there, or times,
I like it.
and maybe a parent night.
I have those on the side.
Kids too.
Oh, perfect.
In
Yeah.
September and
I didn't see
November.
those.
Right. Well,
Okay.
and what I
In
was
February.
thinking about doing with this, instead of trying to add another day, we have a faculty meeting or a PLC day every Wednesday. So one of those faculty meetings or one of those PLC days, if we wanted to roll it out in maybe one subject at a time, then I would just go in on that day that they've already got scheduled for them to be in a meeting. Okay, so now that we've gotten to the end of the school year,
Okay.
and we have been using interactive notebooks in especially the ESOL class, and I know math and science also does this.
They do.
How do you think we could tweak this or change it since we're coming up on STAR? What strategies do you think we have for that?
So what I like about, first of all, I think the interactive notebook in itself is a strategy because it allows them to come back to certain things. So maybe one of the strategies is that y'all go back to specific things that like they kind of struggle with. Like especially in ELAR, you know how that one where you had the different structures of writing, that may be something that they need right before, like they go back and they review that one right there. Yeah. Because when you go back and you review these sort of things, I mean, because that's the beauty of interactive notebook is that it's a tool that you use all the time. And so they go back and then, you know, it's kind of almost like a review of let's go back and look at this because I know that writing is a really difficult thing, writing and reading. I think that's one of the things that I would kind of go back and review it. And then maybe...
What do you think about maybe having specific examples and then the kids have to use this and describe,
Yeah, I think that's...
identify the different...
I think that would be great because then they're like, oh, I have this. And that gives them it's almost like they have a higher level of thinking because they're now, here's a definition and now I've got to figure this out. Especially, and I would almost even use like sample STAR stuff. Of course, we don't know what this one's going to look like this year, which is kind of scary, but I don't know, like if we could, you know, I think that's one of the hardest things. And, you know, another thing you could put in the interactive notebook is maybe some strategies. Like they could talk about different strategies that, you know, you recommend using. Again, we're not gonna know like all of these things, and I think we're kind of going into this sort of blind. But I feel that, you know, strategies is a lot of the different things that I think they need. Are strategies of here, this is how, like, I think this is a great strategy because this tells them this is what you're going to be looking for. And we're talking about all STAR, correct?
Yes.
So then when you go into the science, I wonder if that they highlight the main tasks and create some sort of like one pager or something based on, you know, the main, I forget what you call them. It just escapes my brain. Not the power.
Power standards.
Yeah, the power standards. Thank you. So I want to call them super standards. Like, what is it? But like maybe a one pager or some sort of like interactive strategy that you're using this from, because I think they need to go back into this because I mean that's the basis of these interactive notebooks is all the things that we're learning. So now let's do something with it. I mean, not just like let's not flip through it, but let's do it. Let's go back. Let's review. Let's use these things, and because I think that because it's in their words, and maybe this is the time for them to kind of clarify some things. Like,
Oh, that'd be kind of cool to go back and maybe
like, hey, let's look
through
at
it
these. Let's clarify. Do you understand what this really means? I love this plot diagram, FYI. I love this, and it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, well, when we did this in the classroom, we were reading a story, and so I had the kids put the plot diagram in here, and then they had to go through the story, and they had to put each piece from their story underneath. So when they got to the climax, they had to give a one little sentence under the flap.
So they understood that.
So they could show me that they understood how to go
Because
through
I think
the
we
plot.
review that. They're like, okay, we've already done this. So it's not as scary when they're like, oh, I've done this. And sometimes when you see, I mean, at least for me, oh yeah, I remember this and it helps. I wonder, another thing I was wondering is if, again, we don't have like a sample of what it's going to look like. because then that way you could look at this and then look through your interactive notebook and say, okay, where would we find this and what? But I mean, I guess that for next year, that
For
might be
next year,
something that you
okay.
might want to look at, because it's a tool. It's an interactive tool. It's a living, breathing document. It's in their handwriting, and they have to just keep it like they interact in it. And then, another thing I was wondering is, because we're talking about STAR. I just keep thinking about like what sort of questions that they might. I'm trying to think how you would put that in interactive notebook though, like what sort of concerns that they have. But I don't think that goes with an interactive notebook as much.
Well, it could. I mean, because the one that I have seen in another English class, they had it split by reading and writing. So maybe in like that writing portion, when they do their journals,
Right.
they could have a little spot where they write a question. Or like for this one that I had it set to where we could do vocabulary. We
That's
didn't actually,
cool. I
we
like
didn't
that.
get to that part because I was trying to focus more
Or
on this
part, yeah.
But I'm thinking that now that we've got that, we can
Do
add
the
to-
vocabulary and then do maybe some vocabulary like strategies in there.
Maybe put some cognates in there for
Yes.
these kids so that they can kind of see.
I think the cognates is perfect, especially for EBs. I think that's like awesome.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the other strategies that we were talking about doing with the teachers is having like a word wall or a word bank, especially when they do writing samples, having that word bank and those sentence stems ready so that when they're writing, they kind of have something to look at to get that information.
I think that's a really good idea.
So if we had it to where they have it back in the back where they can
as they
write,
can go back as like a reference tool for them. I think that's a really good idea. And you could probably create it in like, I'm going back old school, Dynazyke sort of foldable things, because I love the foldables when they come out. I do, because it's almost like a game or a pop-up, and it's not as like here's so many notes.
Right.
And that's what I like about that. And I know that when I've seen science as well as yours, they have a lot of I've seen like their moon phases.
Oh, yeah,
And I
that's
really
amazing.
like that. And I like that. And I think it's easy to remember. And then they do like mnemonic devices like within it. And, but again, EB, it might be a little harder for them to do mnemonic devices because of the language issue, but I don't know.
That's actually a good idea.
Mnemonic, I don't even know how you spell mnemonic devices. That my daughter had to do that for
I don't have an M at
biology.
the beginning, right?
Yes, yes, it's very weird.
I wrote it down the way that it sounds, and
Yes.
so then we'll just go from there, and that'll be great. Okay, so how do you think that we could use these, besides just as a reference material for STAR? How could we use this to just study for STAR or kind of get them ready? Do you think possibly, like, okay, so we've got folk tales here, for
Okay.
instance. What do you think about us putting some examples here and have the kids identify?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And I think because again, and then it'll come back as reference material for them. Like, oh yeah, this again. I always come back because this is a living, breathing tool, and like I like to carry one thing with me, and that's always the first thing I've asked kids is like, show me your notebook, because I think I learn from it, especially if I'm not like when they have kids who come in here for algebra and they're like, Miss, can you do algebra? I'm like, if you show me what you're doing. And a lot of times they'll have their interactive notebook and I can go back and I can look at it. And so, yeah, and they've done that just like what you were talking about in their interactive notebook. So it's kind of,
That would actually be kind of cool when the administrative team comes through to walkthroughs too, and they go, "Hey, let me see your journal,"
right.
and the kids can go, "Oh, well, look, we did this on this day," and blah 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 blah.
And
blah.
then they
like,
explain it to you, and then they go, "Oh, I remember." And then they don't need you anymore, which is kind of saved my butt. And with algebra a little bit,
Yes, you're like, "Yeah, you don't need me," but oh,
but it's good because you had these notes and you've done it and you've worked it out and you've showed me like the different steps, and you go back and it's like almost like going back line by line in a sense of them like reteaching them. Oh yeah, because they did it themselves. I think that's the beautiful thing, is that it's not just them like looking at your notes. They have to create that piece of their own learning